This is day 6 of the April 94 7-day retreat in Springwater. Often toward the end of a retreat, added to the question, what am I to do here while sitting, which is more of a question at the beginning, comes, what am I to do when I leave the retreat in my daily life, which for most of us is so busy, so filled up, often with pressures, with tensions. Lots of whirlwind activities and noise. Little or no space and time, as some people report, to have some quiet time for oneself. Whether or not one will create some quiet time for oneself in one's daily life probably depends on the strength of urgency to do so. If there is urgency, the time will appear and the space will be made. Something will be dropped. Sometimes one will say that this family, I don't now pay enough time and attention to the kids. My wife, my husband, the person I'm living with. Well, if there is no space and no way of creating it, then there is none. But is attention, awareness, insight of what's happening this moment, totally dependent on quiet time? Of course it is not. It's not dependent on anything. Many people come here whose first insight happened without ever having had a practice or belonged to a meditation tradition. Something opened up, something was clear, something seen. The fact of no division, no separation, no meanness. That insight happens to human beings and can happen at any time, any place, under all conditions. Because it is our true state of being. It's not something manufactured, in need of doing. It is without any need, without any cause, and without any effort. We've talked at length about effort. This question really has occupied this retreat mind. Effort or no effort. And watching more subtly, more carefully, what effort really is beside the word and the idea. The thought pattern, I must do, I must get someplace, I must work harder. I must attain what I've wanted to attain in the last 16 years. Translates itself into physical tension, pushing. People have reported in different words, but it is not the openness of listening to this effort making as such, without getting caught up and entangled in the content of it. Now quietness, silence, stillness, as we cultivate here in the retreat, very conducive to hear oneself think, for thinking and imaging to become more transparent. That's the beauty of quietness and stillness, the possibility of really hearing one's thoughts resound throughout the body, vibrating with energies, painful energies or joyful energies throughout the body, and to see that connection of one line of thought and this kind of vibration and another kind of thought and the opposite kind of feelings, painful or joyful. And we have asked, where in this instant, almost seemingly instantaneous connection between thinking about something and vibrating, the body vibrating with emotions or sensations, where in this connection is room for a doer, for what somebody who did this. This is how we talk to ourselves about it and to each other about it. It's very difficult to drop this I and me talk, because it is our ingrained, automatized language of expressing things. And it is constantly repeating a falsehood, that there is an independent agent, a doer, an I, the doer, a me to whom it happens. And in observing one thought line and vibrating with the urge to do something about it, and another thought line vibrating with a resistance to do something, then we say, I don't know what to do. Because different vibrations are set up throughout the body through thought and physical emotion and sensation. When one thought line and its accompanying vibrations wins out, and it wins out due to more satisfaction anticipated, more reward experienced in the past, or more fear remembered, or more pain remembered, one of these thought lines and vibration wins out. And then in retrospect we say, I chose to do this over that. In retrospect. In the moment we say, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to choose. Help me choose something. But it is one way of thinking and vibrating with the thinking winning out over another due to reward and punishment of the past anticipated in the future. Then that's how the action follows, or the reaction. Let alone instantaneous reactions, which don't even take this vacillating vibratory pattern from one thought to another, from one feeling to another. Instantaneous reaction of defense or hurt or aggressiveness or lovingness. Who is the doer of it? Can one, by watching in a quiet, gentle, loving environment, as well as in one's day-to-day whirlwind activities, observe the instantaneousness of response to stimulus, and wonder, where was I really in this? We put it that way. We say, well, I reacted that way. And it's all right to use this language, but to be clear that this I is just a way of speaking, meaning it came from this location here, from this organism and mind, which are habitual vibratory patterns of energy, not disconnected from energies of the earth, the sky, the trees, the animals, and the machines. Certainly not disconnected. Anybody who has sat in front of a computer for hours at a time knows how one vibrates with this machine. There's a shake one's head. I don't mean in disapproval. I find it a marvelous machine. to write letters and get many letters written. Never get that many letters written. But one becomes what the cyberneticists called a coupled system. So will we be interested to come upon our functioning in daily life as we have come upon it, maybe a little bit less obstructedly by distractions and noise in a quiet environment? Come upon one mention of the boss or somebody reacting to us, eliciting anxiety or anger, and feel it. Not just, I must feel my anger, but be aware of it. Not just the content of the words that were exchanged, although those can be seen at a glance, and very interesting. What words will set one off, and what words will be the reaction? How we put it, what we react to see it at a glance, but also the wonderment at how we get ticked off so quickly, so thoroughly, sometimes so enduringly, and marvel at it. Why? And not why to quickly let the brain search for explanations, but to keep looking at what comes up. I don't want to be talked to like that. I don't want to be seen like this. Or I'm always seen as the stupid one. To listen finely to the image making of past, present, and projecting into the future about me. And those images vibrate with hurt. Of course, the body vibrates with it. And one will argue, people have argued with me, it's not the image that gets hurt, it's my whole being. So it is. Our whole being is triggered by an image, or an idea, or a memory. Swinging with pain, or guilt, or the urge to either atone or avenge. And this process being sustained and supported by thinking. Not I am thinking, but thinking. One person brought up something yesterday in a group meeting. Sometimes thought is instantaneous, a remembered thought. Instantaneous, doesn't take any time. And then there's also thinking going on. It's a true observation. Remembered things, remembered thoughts become a recording which can instantly be called up and instantly respond. It doesn't take any thinking to jump at somebody or to feel hurt by somebody or to jump out of the way of a snake, is often used as an example. There is instantaneous memory, just like in a computer, coming right off the disk. Thinking about why did I get so perturbed? Why did I jump so instantaneously? At seeing a snake, which may not even have been a snake. This example is often used by Indians. It was a rope. It wasn't a snake. It was not seen right. And by seeing what it actually is, the whole body calms down. A change of perception of the same thing changes totally the vibrations throughout the body. Glands and pouring out chemicals and muscles, organs, heart, breathing and so forth. So looking at that as we're doing right now, that's a process of time. It is a combination of thinking about it, visualizing it, and also looking at the memory of when I did jump at something that wasn't so. Somebody talked about cleaning the basement and something falling off the wall, and she screamed. She thought it was a rat. That instantaneousness, this came, ratness came off the disc instantly. And taking a second look and thinking, why did I get so excited? And then there was a paper bag or something. That is, our best thinking happens when it is mixed with spaciousness to also look at what it is we're saying. Not just automatically coming off the top of the head. And that is something also that is easier learned in quietness, in talking with each other, with one person or with a group of people. Dialoguing, which is becoming very popular these days. People getting together for dialoguing, listening to each other. And maybe also listening to oneself. And not just automatically from opinion and prejudice and idea. Or if it is automatic, then to become aware of it or make each other aware of it. And then see if we can talk from someplace else than the ready-made or ready-stored prejudices and opinions stored in the brain and throughout the body. And in doing this, the likelihood to be able to do it again, to talk while looking, becomes greater. The odds are greater. The more often we do it, the more likely it is to happen again. The more often we see a habit arising, and in the seeing, the habit diminishing or ceasing, because it's seen, the less odds for the habit to appear again, or to be strengthened, let's put it this way. Every time a habit runs unseen, it is strengthened a bit. I'm sure there is a physiological equivalent to it. Connection between neurons or whatever. I have no knowledge of this, but one can feel it. The more one acts or reacts or thinks in a certain way, the more likely one is going to think more in that way. A thickening of the habit. And likewise, the more often the habit is interrupted by attention and not running its full course, the more the likelihood of it thinning a little bit, thinning out a bit. One can test this also by not a past habit which is already established, but something that happens now, getting angry at somebody, anger flaring up instantly. The more the mind goes over what happened to one, the storyline we've called it, going over and over and over it, the more likely it is to appear then some more and go on over again. Yet even though anger flares up, if the mind is more attentive than it used to be, more in the present, watching and sensing and being with what's here, the less one goes over and over that story, and the less likely it is to reappear. And amazingly enough, it can be totally forgotten, because it hasn't had a chance to become firmly established in the memory circuits. Or whatever light establishment there was is not maintained, so it atrophies. All of this is not with someone doing that. These things happen. And if we can really become intimate with the fact that things happen, rather that I am doing them or I should not do them, the more we are attuned to reality, and the less we are given to fault-finding, self-blame, self-deprecation, or other deprecation. finding fault with others, blaming them, that they could have done differently had they only wanted to, had they only taken the right choice. So to watch what choice is in oneself, so one is very clear about this assumption that there is a free chooser, free to do either this or that. Freedom is only there when there's nothing to go on, which is reactive from the past. When there's a presence now, and then what needs to be done seems to be quite obvious, or is quite obvious. Or if it is not obvious, one will, if it's a decision about something to build or to, we engaged in this right now with this center here, one can get all kinds of information, points of view, hear people out, and then weighing, having all 52 cards turned open on the table and looking at the whole thing, which sometimes is bewildering. Again, one doesn't know what to do. So how does one finally choose what to build, what floor to put into the kitchen? One of the patterns of possibilities wins out, because it maybe promises the most approval or the most practicality. Sometimes, if there's in making decisions at companies or businesses or institutions, if it's a butting of wills, then the one with a stronger will win out, not the issue of what is the best for all and the most practical, but who has the most power, and the pleasure of power being the driving motive to make decisions, knocking out the weaker ones, the weaker wills, the weaker power. So this is something to watch during our day-to-day living. Who or what is the chooser? Who or what is the doer? And suspend that assumption. One doesn't know, but one can suspend it, that there is one, or there isn't one, and watch the actual processes, which is not easy. It's not easy for the mind to be attentive and alert. It takes energy to be attentive and alert to one's processes. And some of this energy that brings attention and alertness comes from the interest, finding out about oneself, being at a dead end, not knowing which way to turn. Nothing one has done has worked to make one feel any better, any happier, any clearer. So what is one to do? That's the first question. And the first and maybe the only answer is watch, be attentive, be aware of what goes on. And if you say, well, how am I to be aware? Maybe the first thing there would be not to make such a big thing out of it, something that I need to attain in the future. Because the plane is humming now, the people are moving now, the cushions and clothes on the cushions are sounding, aren't they? The voice is heard now. Peep, 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 that's now. And motor sound. Breathing. Breathing for thousands of years by contemplatives and yogis, mystics, has been used to sort of bring the mind to focus, calm it down. We talked about it the other day. The effectiveness of observing the breathing, to calm down the mind, the body processes that are agitating. Although I remember when I did teach in that way, first breathing practices and then later koans, the perennial question was, how am I to concentrate on my breathing better? Can you give me a hint? Help. There's no doing, there's only breathing. It goes on all the time. And either there's attention or there's inattention. And when there is attention, will the breathing be there? Or immediately followed by thinking, am I doing it well enough? Am I doing it right? Which is off the disc of our conditioning. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it well enough? Somebody brought that question up this morning. It seems the most resounding question when there is some quietness. Am I doing it right? So can one hear that question resounding? Not take it for an incentive to answer it. Because the question from habit, past happenings, triggers immediately the thinking process to find out, to scan all kinds of things, imagine, is this right, is this wrong, and on it goes. Trying to reflect upon itself. Am I doing it right? And answering it through thinking about oneself, doing it right or wrong. That's our habitual response to the question arising, am I doing it correctly? The non-habitual is to hear oneself saying, or to hear this question, am I doing it right? It's a world of difference between the question leading to thinking about whether I'm doing it right or not, or just hearing a question arise, am I doing it right, and doing nothing about it. The listening is the doing, the only doing. Because with the listening to the question, there's also the sound of the motor, and the breathing, and the birds. And this knownness, here-ness, beingness is there, not clouded by thinking about itself. I've probably talked much too fast. Because this is stuff that needs not just be received by the ears and then conducted up to the cortex to be understood verbally, intellectually, but to be looked at as it's happening. So the question, what should I do when I come home? Should I do sitting or more sitting, and how much sitting? Who can tell you? I don't. I can say that it's very nice, a wonderful thing to sit in the morning. When things are just waking up. Maybe the sun hasn't risen yet, because it'll rise earlier and earlier. Traffic is still relatively quiet. No one calls over the phone. Maybe the kids are still asleep. The houses are still. They're breathing stillness. Radios and TVs aren't on yet. To spend quiet time just being there, openly, alertly. or if not openly, then maybe for moments aware of the thinking and not getting sucked into the content of it, but remaining aware that thinking has been taking place and the body is already vibrating with the thoughts, with the anticipation of what I should do today. That thought can be lethal at the time one wants to sleep, because the heart starts pounding to pump the blood to get the energy to do this thing. So, if that's happening, as one is sitting in the morning, if one is, can it be observed? A thought and the heart beginning to beat in anticipation of something that one hasn't even started yet. It's just started as a thought. And the body already getting ready for it. To observe that without any judgment, without doing anything about it, so openly that there's also place for motor and wind and breathing. Rain bumping against the windows and patting on the roof. Whatever's happening. Just being all of that without a doer, without compulsion. And yet if compulsion is churning, to listen to that as one of the motors running. Or if one has time to do some sitting before going to bed, it's an interesting time because it may happen that everything that happened during the day sort of rolls off in front of the mind, particularly the things that were sort of unfinished business. It all reappears once more. Maybe not once more, maybe tomorrow again, tomorrow. But there's a moment to sit with it quietly, look at the whole thing as the shadow play that it is. Shadow play playing on this body. And the body responding with real reactions of glands, organs, and muscles. To listen to it and maybe to finish unfinished business by how does it happen? By seeing the shadow playishness of it, the unreality of remembered stuff, keeping one churning. If there's something that needs to be done or remembered, write it down and remember where you put the piece of paper. And if one really wants to sit, some people don't want to sit, so then they don't sit. But if one really wants to sit, then to say, I have no time, just doesn't make sense. Because what's 5 minutes? And if one asks that question, one may realize there's a real resistance to even taking out 5 minutes. Because we talked about it, one wants to stay, there is this proclivity of the body-mind to stay in the state it is, either sitting down, I don't mean sitting and listening, but watching something, reading something, or dreaming, or moving, remaining in the motion, the resistance to changing directions. So, what will win out? The inertia or the wanting to keep the movement? Or interest in a moment of not knowing what's going to happen? And being with what is without keeping score, whether I'm doing right or well or not. I need to add, if the score-keeping happens, let that be one of the things that is going on and enters into awareness. wanted to say something about silence and quietness. Questions can be asked at any time. And we're being asked here, particularly when we try to make the place quiet as possible. It's not perfectly quiet. When we talk about how to make it quiet for retreat, or when we discuss how to make it quiet in the morning and evening, for an hour for people who do want to sit. Not running showers, not running washing machines. And then we discuss, well, why is there an attachment by some people to quiet? Is one becoming addicted to it? If really it has happened that sitting becomes effortless and joyful, is there a growing addiction? Some people ask. Someone doesn't want that precious thing disturbed. Again, who can answer it but looking oneself and inside into maybe very subtle motives? Also, becoming a very good meditator. We always want to be something, unless we watch it very carefully and the becoming dissipates in the being. Not being something, just being nothing. No word is needed. But one can look, is there not only a subtle attachment to this quiet space, but also is it, as it were, artificially maintained by will, by fear. Fear of its collapsing, fear of losing it, and the willpower to sustain it. That's not complete silence. Complete silence is openness without effort. It happens without the doer, without the willer or the maintainer, without fear of loss. This is something to observe quietly by oneself, to question at least, and let it, actually when a question is asked, and the brain doesn't scurry around to find an explanation, it's quiet, it understands that this is not called for. When a question is asked, and silence follows, the silence of not knowing, then things have a way of revealing themselves that were maybe not seen before. To the question, are you addicted to quietness because one would like for an hour to have the place as noiseless as possible? Can one also watch? Don't you find that when a fan that has been humming and humming and humming suddenly turns off, that the body sort of, I don't know how to describe it, it just jumps with joy. The jumping is too crude. All of a sudden, one hadn't even hassled about it or bickered about it internally. One wasn't really completely aware of it. But when that thing turns off, there's a feeling like that. I may have exaggerated it, but so sounds do impact this nervous system, which is so strained by the stress of noise, the impact of noise. Any noise, and a moment of quietness, which is never perfect. We are told that too, well, there are the crows cawing. You can't do anything about that. So there's always something, but sort of a mechanical, continuous drone, of washing machine or whatever, has a particular impact on this nervous system and body. And if it can be avoided, it may not be, because we live with machines to heat the place, to have the water, to wash the laundry, rinse the dishes. And not just because we want to, but there's a health department that is watching over us. If we can minimize it, why not? One can notice the benefits of quietness for at least brief periods of time. It's not possible to maintain it all day long, at least not the way we live here, and probably not the way you live at home. But early in the morning or late at night, or sometimes in the middle of the night, one cannot sleep, and tossing gets one nowhere. There is a time when even the crows don't caw. Heat is turned down. No one washes the laundry at midnight. Maybe somebody does. Not here. At home? Probably not. So our last question, is it possible for human beings so conditioned as we are, not just to react the way we do, but to want to do things, to want to fix things, to want to be in control and in charge, to let awareness take care of the whole thing? Let it show up what's there, and let its intrinsic wisdom take care. Doing or not doing, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, everything happens on its own anyways. In vast space that does not move, we will end here for today.